Good afternoon, dear students. I hope you all are fit and fine at home. Alright, so this is Amrita BL from ASC Independent PU College, Department of Biology. In this video, we will be starting with a new chapter, that is Biodiversity and Conservation, which comes under the unit Ecology. And the weightage for this chapter is 4 marks. That means 4 marks are allotted for your examination point of view. So under this chapter, we will be studying with two important concepts. Firstly, introduction to biodiversity, that basically includes the meaning and definition of biodiversity, and we will be studying with the levels and types of biodiversity, estimation of number of species and pattern of biodiversity. In the second half of the chapter, we will be studying about the importances of species diversity, what are the losses of biodiversity, what are their main causes for biodiversity loss, and why there is a need to conserve or to protect the biodiversity, and finally we will be dealing with the two important types of conservation. Firstly, it is in situ conservation, and secondly it is ex situ conservation. So this is about the bird view of the chapter biodiversity and conservation. So coming to the first slide. So what do you mean by biodiversity? So biodiversity, if you just split the word bio and diversity, bio meaning to say life forms or which has life, diversity means variety or different types of forms, or different forms or variety is known as diversity. By just combining these two words, we can define it as the variety of living organisms that are present on earth or that are present in a world is known as biodiversity. Now coming to the actual definition of biodiversity. So biodiversity is nothing but it is the study of any kind of living organisms. The living organisms may be of plant, or it might be animal, or it might be microorganisms. So these living organisms which are found in particular area or in a particular habitat or in a particular niche is known as biodiversity. Now what do you mean by habitat? Habitat is a place where an organism live, or it is a place where an organism is residing is known as habitat. What do you mean by niche? So niche is nothing but it is a place where an organism gets fitted and it gets adapted to that particular environment is known as niche. Okay, so in simple words you can also define biodiversity as it is the sum and total of species richness. Now comes the point, what do you mean by species richness? So species richness is nothing but it is the number of species that are present within an unit area is known as species richness. In a given unit area, how many number of species are able to accommodate that area is known as species richness. Then so the term biodiversity was coined by Walter G. Rawson in the year 1985. So he is the person who coined the term the biodiversity, and the next person is a person who has described or who has given the concept of biodiversity in detail. So he is the person Edward Wilson. Then moving on to the types of biodiversity. Basically there are three different types of biodiversity or three levels of biodiversity. Firstly it is genetic diversity, secondly it is species diversity, and thirdly it is ecological diversity. Ecological diversity is also known as ecosystem diversity. So let us take up one by one in our further slides. So this is an pictorial diagram of types of biodiversity. Just below you can see the genetic diversity. Just towards your right screen you can see species diversity, and towards your left screen you can see the ecosystem diversity or ecological diversity. So each one we will be talking now. So the first type of biodiversity is genetic diversity. So what do you mean by genetic diversity? As the name itself says, genetic means it is something which is related to the genes and genetic information. So combining together, we can define genetic diversity as it is the measure of variety of genes and the related genetic informations that are present in an organism is known as genetic diversity. Okay, so I repeat, the genetic diversity is something which deals with the genes and the genetic information of a person. So the variation, the measure of variations that are seen in genes and genetic information within the species are called as genetic diversity. Okay, if you look at the image here, it depicts that all human beings belong to one species. We call that as Homo sapiens, right? So but there is a variation among each individual. The variation may be will be their size, or it may be their shape, or it may be their skin tone, or it might be their eye color. Okay, so each individual is different from the other individual. Such kind of variations are known as genetic diversity. So if we take up the second example, the second example will be related to the plant species. So one of the plant species called as Ravolfia vomitoria. The common name of this plant species are devil's pepper plant. So these plants are very much grown in the Himalayan ranges. So these plants produces an active biocomponent called as reserpine. So this reserpine has many or lots of medicine purposes. Okay, the third example will be about the rice. So there are about 50,000 strains of rice, so like basmati rice, Burma black rice, Sona Masuri, Jaya, Ratna, Jyoti. All these are the varieties of rice strains that can be seen in India. So the fourth example under genetic diversity will be there are about 1000 varieties of mango. So say for example Totapuri, Mallika, Neelam, Alfonso, all these are the different varieties of the strains mango. Okay, so they belong to same species, but they have some of the variations in their genes and genetic information. That is about the genetic diversity. Then the second type of biodiversity is species diversity. So species diversity is nothing but, again, it is the measure of variety of species within a particular area is known as species diversity. In simple words, you can also tell the species diversity as the diversity is at the species level, or the diversity which can be seen in the species level are known as species diversity. Okay, so if we take an example of Western Ghats, right? So this Western Ghats are more diverse than the Eastern Ghats. Like the amphibian species are more abundantly found in Western Ghats rather than the Eastern Ghats. Then the third type of the biodiversity is known as ecological diversity or ecosystem diversity. Again, it is the measure of variety of ecosystem or the habitat present in an geographical area. Now comes the point, or in simple you can also define it as diversity which is seen at the ecosystem level is known as ecological diversity. Now what do you mean by ecosystem? So ecosystem is nothing but to develop a good harmony with the surrounding environment. So to develop the positive interaction among the surrounding environment is known as ecosystem. Okay, so coming to the some of the examples of ecological diversity are deserts. We know that these deserts are the barren area where there is little precipitation occurs, where there is no rainfall or the water content will be comparatively less in case of desert areas. So this is one of the example for ecological diversity. The second example will be rainforests. So this rainforests are the dense forest which are very much rich in biodiversity, where there is a heavy rainfall. The third examples are mangrove. So this mangrove is a tree or any shrub which grows in the coastal swamp or in case of brackish water. Okay, so it is a tree with roots which are above the ground are known as mangrove. The fourth examples are coral reefs. So these coral reefs are large underwater structures which are made up of dead or living corals. So corals are nothing but the stony substances which are secreted mainly by the marine coelacanths. Then the last example will be estuarine or estuaries. So these estuaries are the wide part of a river at a place where it joins the sea. So a river which meets the sea, that point is known as estuarine. So with this I complete the meaning, definition of biodiversity and the type of biodiversity. Thank you dear students.